As I said at the top of the show, today we are focusing on what has been called a school-to-prison pipeline. Earlier this week, we sat down with Satana DeBerry, who was just elected as the new district attorney for Durham County. Part of her campaign called for changes in how the criminal justice system and schools interact. Take a look. Well, we're pleased to have Satana DeBerry with us today. She was just elected as the new district attorney for Durham County. Welcome, and thanks for joining us on Education Matters.
Thanks for having me, Keith.
All right, well, first of all, you'll be sworn in January. Let's tell a little bit about your background. You are a native of North Carolina. You're an attorney, Princeton and Duke, but even though you're an attorney, most of your work has been, well, how would you describe it, in public policy?
I would say I've done, at least for the last 10 or 15 years, mostly policy and advocacy work.
Okay. So what made you decide to run for district attorney? I saw a couple of things that we're going to talk about on the show today is around the issues of prosecuting children in court, reform of the criminal justice system, but sort of what were your driving issues?
Well, I started out as a criminal defense attorney in my hometown in Rockingham, and the reason I stopped doing that work was because it really became clear to me that kind of all the power was with the prosecutors, with the district attorney's office. And so I felt like I could do more for the people that I was working for if I did this kind of policy and advocacy work, kind of systems change work. So I've done a lot of work around healthcare, affordable housing, community economic development. And so a couple years ago, some of the groups that I've been working with in Durham around affordable housing issues and community economic development issues came to me and said, we'd like you to run for district attorney. Like, you understand how all of these systems work together to especially impact communities of color and low-income communities. You have a broader vision than just prosecuting people, and that's what we've been trying to do in Durham. So they've been working on criminal justice reform for maybe a decade, and at every point they've gotten some inroads with law enforcement, with judges, and got stopped at the DA's door.
Right. You mentioned prosecuting, that one of your platform ideas is to stop prosecuting children in adult court. Now, I thought we just raised the age for children that can only be tried in adult court when they're 18. So, but is that still an issue, even with the new law?
Yeah, sure. So the new York law has not gone into effect yet. General Assembly is currently writing rules around it. So there's still a lot of advocacy around how that's going to be applied. But the district attorney in North Carolina has a lot of discretion, has almost 100% discretion in all issues except DWIs. So depending on the jurisdiction, the district attorney certainly still has the discretion to try teenagers in adult court, and certainly for violent crimes.
So why is this why is that a problem, I guess, for you? I mean, if someone commits a crime, if they're 15, 16, why should they not be tried as an adult?
Well, I mean, first we have to think about, there are really two categories of crimes that we're talking about. We're talking about violent crimes, and then we're talking about nonviolent crimes, mostly drug crimes, mostly things that, like fights or simple possession of marijuana, those are the things that tend to happen at school. And those are the things for which children tend to be referred to the criminal justice system. Criminal justice system is an incredibly blunt object. It has no nuance about it at all. Right. And children need that nuance. Any child that comes into contact with the criminal justice system is a troubled child. There's no doubt about that. But we don't have the resources to really look at why that child is troubled. I think it is better to leave the consequences to these kind of low-level issues to the people who know the most about children, the people who deal with children every day, who know about the developmental ages of children, how children act at certain ages, what their issues are, what their trauma is. I am not, as a prosecutor, equipped to deal with that.
Right. Well, and you mentioned about where children are, and I've read an article, which is why I reached out to you to come on the show, that you wanted to make some changes to how Durham County handles school-based incidents. Right now, with sort of growing use of police officers, off-duty police officers, school resource officers, we're actually seeing, quite an increase in criminal referrals out of school. What do you want to do there?
I'd like in Durham County to move towards not taking those type of referrals from school, to moving to where we have resources inside the school to deal with kids who have disruptive behaviors. We're not talking about violent crime. Certainly when you talk about what happened, say for example, at Butler High School in Charlotte, that is a tragedy. And that is certainly the type of thing where there does need to be criminal justice intervention. Kids fighting at school, a kid who mouths off at a teacher because they have some other issue. Those are not things that we can deal with in the criminal justice system.
Right.
Well.
Right. Now, some teachers might be watching in this interview, and maybe some parents too, and thinking, that if the child is doing something that rises to a crime, I want law enforcement, I want the district attorney's office to have my back, so to speak. I mean, what's your response to concerns that I don't know, that you sort of might be sending a message that some of this behavior is actually okay?
Well, I don't think we're sending the message that it's okay. There are always consequences to behavior that kind of breaks our social contract with each other. The first thing I would say is that my number one priority is to keep all the people of Durham County safe. That includes the children of Durham County. And for children, interaction with the justice system is traumatic and sometimes is not in their best interest. I come from a family of teachers. My parents taught, my grandparents taught, my siblings either teach now or have taught in the past.
And you have 3 children in Durham Public Schools right now.
3 kids in Durham Public Schools. So my parents taught in public schools, my siblings teach in public schools. So this is a really important issue to me. As a parent, as somebody who lives in this community, the waste of human capital when we send kids to the criminal justice system, as opposed to dealing with their issues in school, it's inexcusable. That's not who we want to be in Durham County. Right. We want to keep every child safe, and we want every child to grow up to their potential. And sometimes that means intervention, and that means consequences. That doesn't have to be the criminal justice system that is that consequence.
You are familiar with the term school to prison pipeline.
I am very familiar with that term.
Does that exist?
Absolutely.
What does that mean to you?
I think what it means to me is that for black and brown children, we involve, for very minor things, we involve them with the criminal justice system early. And we know there are thousands of collateral consequences to being involved with the criminal justice system just for adults. So imagine what happens to a child who's very early been identified as a criminal justice problem, right? Not as a behavioral problem, but as a criminal. That child then, throughout their educational career, comes into more contact with law enforcement. They come into more contact with juvenile justice authorities. And kind of the best way to create an adult criminal is by creating a child criminal.
Do you think we've exacerbated that with, look, we're concerned, everyone's concerned about school shootings and safety, but the zero tolerance policies, increasing use of law enforcement, I mean, have we made it worse? This school to prison pipeline.
I think zero tolerance policies absolutely have made it worse. Again, I am not an expert in children, right? I'm not an educational expert.
Me either.
Right? But what we know is that we deal with kind of the fallout of kids who are not in school. And so the safest place for a kid is in school. I think there was an article that report that just came out this week from Howard that in North Carolina schools, we actually have not been keeping kids more safe by having SROs in the school. And so I think at least the district attorney's office, we're going to start to talk about these issues. Great.
Well, we look forward to seeing what you do in Durham County. We're going to certainly follow this. It's a big policy issue for the country and for the state. But thanks for coming on and talking to us about it. We appreciate it. And good luck in your new role.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks again to DA-elect DeBerry for coming on. When we come back, we're going to be joined by the co-director of the Youth Justice Project, a nonprofit that focuses on equity and fairness in education and the juvenile justice system. Stick around.
Each week in part by Paragon Bank, serving others, enriching lives.